Welcome everyone to the Q&A session for our upcoming course, Celtic Virtues to Cultivate Lasting Peace Within, the 10-week journey to call upon shamanism, myth, and spiritual vision to move confidently through these uncertain times. I'm Lisa Bonise, and I'm really excited to be hosting this Q&A conversation for the Shift Network, where we'll explore the teachings of Jane Burns and address questions about her upcoming 10-week course, Celtic Virtues to Cultivate Lasting Peace Within, which begins Wednesday, July 8th. And a little later, I'll explain how you can participate in the course even if you can't be there live. But first, I want to introduce our guest. Jane Burns is a writer, practitioner, and teacher of Celtic shamanism and spirituality. She began her work as a shamanic practitioner in 2003 and as a teacher of shamanic studies in 2006. Her book, Up a Tree, a shamanic novel and handbook, was published in 2014, followed 5 years later by her oracle cards, Portal to the Sacred Trees. Jane has studied Course shamanism with Sandra Ingerman and Celtic shamanism with Tom Cowan. She's a longtime member of the Society for Shamanic Practice and serves on the editorial board for their journal. And in just a few minutes, we're going to open up for your questions. But first, I want to welcome Jane, who's going to begin our time together by leading us in a guided meditation. Welcome, Jane. It is always so good to spend time with you.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. It's wonderful to be here. And greetings, everyone. I'd like to open really right where we are, right where we find ourselves nowadays, which is in a very transformative time. It seems like everyone is really keeping close watch on what's going on in the world around them. And also, I think, keeping a close watch and monitoring what's going on within themselves, their inner selves, and the changes that are taking place in their lives and in their work, in their relationships. And, it's an uncertain time, but the ancients would look upon uncertain times as those times that held much more potential for change and development and maturity and growth and expansion than times of stability. Times of stability were when you sort of rested on your laurels a little bit and kind of, laid back and reaped the benefits of your hard work. But when the transformative times came along, it was kind of time to get busy and to begin to look at what was being asked of us as we moved forward into a new world. How would we rebirth ourselves? Who would we be in that new world? And so in this new post-COVID world that lies somewhere ahead, we don't know where, who will we be? And who can we look to for guidance with helping us through this passage? Now, the ancient Celts might well have turned to the moon to ask such a question. The Celtic astrologers were much more likely to make observations and to follow the movements of the moon rather than the sun. And they understood the movements well in advance. They could see well into the future and knew all the phases of the moon, not just the ones that were current or in the near future, but in the distant future. And they measured their own movements and their own capacity to change by her movements. And there was something in all of that, her capacity to diminish and to grow, that they felt was a reflection of their own capacity to do the same. And so that would be a very good place to start. There is an old Scottish blessing that says, love and affection of the moon be yours. And there's an Irish prayer that says, I bend my knee to you, O new moon of the periods. And in that, can't you see this abiding love and reverence between the ancient Celts and the moon, something that we've kind of lost. Before the man in the moon was a man, she was a goddess, and I would love to see her restored to her rightful place. She was always a goddess because the moon was connected to women's menstrual cycles, to fertility, to it moved the tides of the great Mother Ocean, and was strongly associated with water, which was a very feminine element. In Celtic lore, we have the Welsh goddess Arianrhod, and she was the goddess of the moon, also the goddess of the night, the goddess of fertility, of death and reincarnation. The moon knows how to die and rebirth itself, knows that really, really well. It does it every month. And so it's a good teacher for us right now in our desire to know how to transform. The name Arianrhod is a Gaelic one, and the first part of Arianrhod, Arian means silver, and the second part of rod means wheel or disc, and this was to honor the great silver wheel of the moon. She was strongly connected to the sky, which was her home, and also very much connected to the ocean, which was whose tides she was responsible for moving. She was also said to have had 2 children, a son, Dylan, who was fathered by the sea, and another son, Lou, who was fathered by an eagle. And she didn't lay claim to either one of them. She denied the maternity of both of them, but that's another story that we don't need to go into right now. So we're going to take a short guided journey to meet Arianrhod and seek her knowing on who we can be reborn as in this transformative time. So I'm going to get my drum and I'm going to just tap gently on it so that you can still hear me talking. I want you to sit comfortably in your chair and with your feet on the floor. And I want you to close your eyes. Take a deep breath and enter your inner landscape and walk across this lush green land. It's nighttime, but there's a bright full moon shining down. Nearby, there is a lovely circular lake, round like the moon, and reflecting her light. Make your way to its edge. You look at the light from this luminous moon as it streams down in its heavy beams, how it lights up everything. And as you look at this luminous light, it begins to take form until you see within it a very tall and imposing feminine presence. And this is Arianrhod. Like the moon itself, she's reflective. She's a mirror. This is a time for you to be reflective, she says. To contemplate who you are becoming. Move closer to the water and look deeply into it. The goddess provides for you there a mirror to look into, and it will show you who you are becoming, who you can become. Observe that image deeply. And if you feel ready, welcome this changed and new self into your life. The image in the mirrored lake now disappears. but you will keep it in your memory and in your heart. Arianrhod bestows a blessing of moonlight upon you. Take that blessing into your whole being and feel yourself expand with it. Take a deep breath. Open your eyes and return to the room.
Thank you, Jane. That was beautiful.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm still sort of coming back. So let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to do here for the rest of the time together. We do have the rest of our time together to dive into viewer questions for Jane as we prepare for her upcoming course, Celtic Virtues, which begins Wednesday, July 8th. And if you want to visit the website and learn more about the 10-week course, you can visit CelticShamanismCourse.com to see the full description. So let's go ahead and get us some Q&A. If you have a question for Jane, go ahead and type it in. I'll be happy to pass it along. And in the meantime, we got a couple questions already waiting for us. So let's start off with a question from Nancy, who wants to know, how are Irish and Scottish versions of Celtic spirituality and shamanism similar and different? Do they share many of the same practices, stories, gods, goddesses, etc.?
There's some overlap. I mean, as there is with any two or more shamanic traditions. But you know, as I've said many times before, and I think that this is important, the spirituality of an indigenous people always arises from the land and their relationship with it. And to the extent that Scotland is a different terrain and different land, somewhat, certainly, than Ireland, different stories are going to arise. There's a different way of life. There's a different view of the world that is going to determine their practices, their beliefs, their stories. Their language is different. Scots Gaelic is different from Irish Gaelic, and their prayers and blessings are unique. The prayers that come out of the Hebridean Islands are absolutely stark and gorgeous, just so rich and beautiful. You know, but you know, the Irish have many beautiful prayers and stories of their own. Their stories are somewhat different. There's some overlap with the characters. They tend to have parallel stories. So, for instance, you might have, you know, the Cailleach, the story of the Cailleach, and how she, you know, tends her fire in the winter and blah blah blah. That's an Irish goddess, whereas Bera is the Scottish goddess, Queen of Winter. But very similar stories about how she does, you know, she serves the same purpose and fulfills the same role. So I think that their spirituality in general. And when we talk about Celtic spirituality, we are generally talking about the influence of Christianity on the indigenous practices. And the Celtic people held on very strongly to their nature-based practices when Christianity came along and very beautifully enfolded those practices. They were resistant to the idea of things like original sin because they really believed in the goodness of everything, the immanence of God in all things, including humans. And humans were very much seen to be part of nature beings. So I don't know. I would say that there is a lot of similarity just in the worldview. But there are some unique twists and some beautiful things that you find unique to one and not so much to the other.
Okay, thank you. On a similar path here, Courtney is wondering if you can talk a bit about the Druids and their role in Celtic wisdom.
Well, the Druids fulfilled a lot of roles. I mean, they were the lawmakers, they were the priests, they were magicians. They were very closely aligned with the elements. They observed everything in nature that they didn't understand, because that's where they felt the magic would lie. And they were responsible for kind of overseeing and keeping order. So you find them in situations where, for instance, in the story of the Nine Waves, when the Celts actually arrive, the Malaysians arrive from the Iberian Peninsula, and also from France, what is now France. When the ships arrive, it is the Druids who are called to protect the kings of the Tuatha De Danann, who are currently residing on the throne. They're three brothers who were kings, and they call on the Druids to do their worst, because their armies are not ready to fight these Malaysians and the Gauls who arrive, and so they rely on the Druids to create spells and to create a great storm so that the ships can't land. But the leader of the Malaysians, Averin, he finds a way around that. He starts calling out to the land herself and wooing her, and she puts a stop to all of that. and the waves calm, and the ships are able to land. So they fulfilled many roles. They were seers, and they would foretell the future. They were advisors to the kings, they were great students of nature. They also created a lot of medicines. They were very strongly connected to the trees, had deep relationships with the trees, and learned a great deal of wisdom from them.
Okay. Well, since you brought up tree wisdom, we actually do have several people who are asking if you would talk just a bit about tree wisdom. You've got your oracle deck, which features the wisdom of trees. So why don't we go ahead and talk about that for a little bit?
Well, sure. Different trees were known for having different strengths, and a lot of that arose out of the study of the trees, which were done by the Druids, and they were able to, in their observations, see that different trees had different strengths, and then the legends that would follow around the trees would tell stories about that. So, for instance, you have the white poplar, which, one of the things that they observed about the white poplar was how even when all of the other trees in the forest, their leaves would be still, the white poplar would still be flapping its leaves. And there was an understanding that when the leaves would react to the wind and would respond, they were giving messages from the spirits. They were bringing messages from the gods. And so from that observation, the ancients determined that the white poplar must have a closer relationship with the gods, because it was hearing messages that the other trees weren't hearing. And so that wisdom, that was connected to that tree, had to do with its closer relationship to the divine. And it also had, because it was so revered for this reason, it was also, when Christianity comes along, it became a target for, it was sort of demonized by Christian teachings. And what that Christian teaching was that these trees, the wood from these trees was where the wood for the cross that Christ was hung on came from. And so that becomes part of the legend too. And yet the tree is strong enough and able to understand that. I remember having a conversation with white poplar about that and said, I really don't like that story. I'm not going to include that in when I teach about the white poplar. And the tree said, oh no, that's part of my story. That's me too. That's my history. So that's a wisdom right there, that, we oftentimes in our own personal lives, there are things that we don't want to reveal about ourselves and that we want to sweep under the rug. But that's all, important, that all of that tells who we are. So, I think that, there are things that are associated, strengths and things that are associated with each of the trees. So, I could run through them. Alder is the tree of the warrior, and it's also the tree of prescience and the ability to foretell the future. It has a really strong connection to water, and it has an energy and a wisdom about knowing how to let go of things. So it's like when you have a particular situation, you have a particular issue in your life, you go to the tree that has the wisdom for that. Birch is about purity. It's about, and it has these qualities, that have to do with cleanliness and purity. They made brooms out of birch, and cradles out of birch, because it was considered to be pure, and it was about birth, and it was about newness and dawn. The beech trees were connected to dedication. They were trees that knew how to be disciplined, how to follow a spiritual discipline. So, for instance, if you were someone who was deciding that you wanted to undertake a spiritual discipline, you wanted to make a big change in your life, beech was the tree that you would go to for advice and for wisdom as to how to do that. You might ask for that tree to be your protectorate and be your teacher, during that time when you're developing your dedication to your spiritual practice. Honeysuckle, it's very associated with the sweetness of life, with joy. It has it has a lot of allure, a lot of like attractive kind of energy when you think about, how the bees and the butterflies just love honeysuckle and the beautiful smell that it gives off into the summer air. It's almost intoxicating. And so it's about having that kind of energy when you want to draw things to you, right? You want to start a new project, for instance, and you want people to find that appealing. Honeysuckle is a great teacher for that because it knows how to do that. It has that strength. It has that wisdom. I talked about oak when I had the conversation with Stephen Dinan last week, and it's the tree of the wounded healer. It's the one that's the tree of strength, of endurance, of it knows how to transmute adversity, the lead of adversity, into the gold of wisdom. It was also thought to be the tree that was the archive of all the other trees' wisdom. And it had its own, the word, it comes from the Gaelic dúr, which means door. There was this idea that it was a portal. It was a portal to this greater knowledge, that it was a doorway. I could go on and on, but you get the idea. I think, it's like the observations were made, of what trees had what strengths. And then in your life, when you needed teachings around that particular matter, you went to that particular tree and to garner that wisdom. Trees are very, very easy to communicate with. Unlike, I don't know. I suppose for some animals are really easy to communicate with. Live animals. I don't have any trouble communicating with animals inside a journey, but I've yet to figure out my cat, after 18 years. So I don't know. I guess I'm not real good at that. But trees, I think, are really, really easy to communicate with. You can just walk up to them and you can have a full-blown conversation in no time at all. They're real accessible, and they love to converse. They love to communicate. any tree, I think, carries a whole wealth of wisdom, and one of the things that an exercise that I give to my students, and here's something I'll just pass along to everyone. There's an exercise that we do with trees, and it is in relationship to when you are involved in a dynamic with somebody, and there's some kind of a stumbling block. There's someone that you aren't getting along with, or you're in a struggle in that relationship. I'll have the students think about a relationship that is kind of problematic or difficult for them, and then I set them loose, out in my yard, and they wander among the trees, and they find a tree that seems to call to them, or that they just feel drawn to, and they go and they introduce themselves to the tree, and they tell the tree about the problem in the relationship that they're having, and they ask the tree, what virtue do I need to hone and emulate in order to heal the breach or the difficulty, the discord in this relationship? And the tree will convey that wisdom to them, because the trees are experts with the virtues. They're very virtuous beings. That's why they're included in this course.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for that. That's fascinating. I can't wait to hear more. For those of you who are just joining us, we're here with Jane Burns, learning about her upcoming course, Celtic Virtues to Cultivate Lasting Peace Within, which begins Wednesday, July 8th. And you can log on to CelticShamanismCourse.com for all the details and to register. So let's get back into questions. We got plenty here waiting for you. Here's one from another Jane who wants to know, what's the Celtic view on soul loss and soul retrieval?
Well, I don't know that it's any different from other traditions. I'll tell you something that's a little bit different. I usually, when I'm working with my clients and we're working on a particular issue, I work with Celtic guides, and I really do try to stick pretty much to the practice of Celtic shamanism, even when I'm working with clients. And one of the things that I've observed that my helping spirits, Celtic helping spirits, will do is that they insist on bringing back usually three soul parts. The Celts loved three, and three is a number of balance. And so here's this idea where, instead of bringing back one soul part and integrating that, you bring back three that are all related to the same issue, that are kind of three strands of the same issue, three slants on the same issue. Because oftentimes with soul loss, a soul loss will happen, like maybe in early life, for instance. The things that happen afterwards, the soul loss that happens afterwards in life, oftentimes is related to that initial, event and that initial loss, so that the loss kind of becomes oftentimes compounded. And so the helping spirits have shown me that oftentimes it's more effective if you're working on a particular issue. You don't just go to where that issue first created soul loss in that person's life, but you also look to where it then happened again and again. And with the return of the three, there is more strength and more balance that is brought to the individual on that particular issue and in healing that particular imbalance. Beyond that, I would say there's a real interesting twist with something called soul raising, which is something that we have observed, and this is something that was brought to light by Tom Cowan, who is a Celtic scholar and Celtic shaman, and it's called soul raising, and it's a phenomenon where you go in as a practitioner, you're looking for a soul part that is maybe a 5-year-old, something that happened in the person's life when they were still a child, and you find a grown soul part. And that is a part that has been raised by the Fae. And so that's an aspect of soul loss that's called soul raising. And you do encounter it every once in a while. While the soul part is in non-ordinary reality, it encounters some kind of fey custodial spirit that raises the soul part as its child. So when it returns, it's in adult form, and it also returns strengthened and made much wiser by its experience.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Another topic entirely, we've got a couple different people asking, so let me sort of combine their questions. Sonia's wondering, will this work help me get closer to my ancestors? And similarly, Tiffany says that her mother just passed away last month. Would you recommend using Celtic shamanism to keep their relationship feeling connected?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know Celtic shamanism specifically, but the shamanic journey and shamanic practice is, I think it's essential in keeping the relationship with our loved ones who have passed over alive. You know, I've lost both of my parents and a brother, and I'm able to communicate with them anytime I want. You know, the relationship does go on after all. And so let's keep up our end on it, you know, and we can do that with the shamanic journey. I feel it's essential. It's essential to have that continued guidance, to have that continued relationship, to allow them to continue to participate in our lives, which they want to do. And, you know, it helps us it helps appease our grief. Yeah, absolutely. What was the first part of the question? Because you sort of said two things there.
Yeah, the first one was asking how this can help connect with ancestors.
Oh, how it can connect with ancestors. Well, you can always do ancestral work. I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, a byproduct of this work. There is nothing to prevent you from going in and actually meeting with your ancestors through the shamanic journey. But also, you know, when you are doing this work, you are helping your ancestors, you know, because you are returning to the roots from which they also came. And you are in many ways honoring that. And by your revisiting of it, by your relivening of it, your awakening of it, you are in many ways lending greater strength to your family lineage. I mean, I find that to be true in my family and in my life. It's brought me much closer to my ancestors. I feel that they're very much right at hand throughout every day of my life. They're right at my elbow. And, you know, and one of the reasons is because they feel this material stirring. They feel these rituals and these old prayers being said again, these old practices being done again. And believe me, they cluster around. They're hungry for it because it was lost to them. And it's been lost to your line.
Thank you. Thank you. You're giving me so much to think about here. Similarly, you're talking about connecting with ancestors, but what about guides? Martha wants to know, how can I identify my guides?
Well, once again, you know, this is through the shamanic journey. And journeying is just something that practice makes perfect. You know, you just keep at it. You just keep at it. You just keep at it. And in time, those guides will appear. You can also invoke them. I mean, you can say in the journey, you're going to work with usually primarily a power animal. That's the first guide that you receive. And if there is an aspect of your life that you want to maybe you want, for instance, let's go back to the last question. Maybe you want to make a stronger connection to your ancestors, or learn more about them, or learn more about, for instance, the gifts that have been passed to you by your ancestors. Or maybe you want to know what is the unfinished work of one of my ancestors that I can maybe take up and participate in to bring that work to back into the world. And so you would go into the journey and ask your power animal to take you to an ancestral guide who could work with you, someone who is in your family lineage. And I have such an individual a guide from my lineage who shows up usually when I have work to do, that is ancestrally related, and I go into the journey. I may be asking a question that I don't understand even has ancestral roots or ancestral meaning. And if he shows up, then I know where we're going, and I know that this is a particular issue that is arising out of the family line and is not just, individual and unique to my particular life. But it's the same with any guide, really. I mean, you go into the journey and express the desire to have a guide to help you, maybe help you shapeshift, or help you to learn more about Celtic shamanism. I don't know, and then the guides will appear. I mean, you really want them vetted. You want to work with your power animal and have your power animal take you to them. I always tell people, please don't, go into the journey and some guy just shows up and walks up to you and you just, accept them at face value. Any guide that you work with should be vetted by your power animal. That's your most trusted ally. And, and then over time, sometimes those guides fall away and they're replaced by other ones that become more relevant for the kind of work that you're doing in that particular point in time. So, it's a fluid and progressive kind of thing. The work grows and changes all the time. Your journeys will change all the time. The helping spirits you work with will change all the time. I mean, I would say the only helping spirit for me that has remained constant since I started doing this work is my power animal. My one power animal, and that's always who I go to vet any other guides, to guide the work, to oversee the work, to take me where I need to go. And I really think that that's important. That's a discipline that I highly, highly recommend.
Okay, thank you. This next question is addressing something that you said in your conversation with Stephen Dinan. This is from Bridget, who says, you said something that really caught my attention, that we need to surrender the need to suffer. Would you talk more about that, please?
Yeah, I mean, it is a little out there for us, But what it has to do with is this idea that we can only learn through adversity. I mean, that seems to be the human condition, the human experience, right? And, just even now, what's going on in the world, that, look, we've known for a long, long time, that we're all connected. We've known that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. We've known that we should treat others the way treat others the way we would like them to treat others, the way we would like them to treat us. Oh my God, the golden rule. So we've known this for years, right? But still, look at us. Look at this world, and look at where we are right now, and some of the things that have been happening recently. We seem to need the dark teachings this is the human condition. We seem to need adversity to force our hand a bit and wake us up, break us in a way until we become compassionate, until we say uncle, until we see it. We don't seem to be able to take it at face value. But, I think that there comes a time when there's been so much suffering in your life that you just say, I don't need this anymore to be my teacher. I will elect to make these changes on my own. I will become committed to my own growth, to my own expansion, to the growing of my own soul. I will become committed to that so that I don't need to have my hand forced and go through these periods of adversity and suffering in order to come to a place of truth.
Okay, thank you. Looking at the clock here, we have time for a few more questions, but before we take those, I'll go ahead and give a few details about the course. People are asking about that as well. Once again, it's called Celtic Virtues, and this is going to be really just a powerful 10-week journey with Jane under her expert guidance. I've worked with her in the past. It's a fantastic journey, and this is where you'll step back in time and invoke the wisdom of heroes, gods, goddesses, wise old trees, and more. To move forward in your life with gratitude, acceptance, compassion, and humility. And the 10-week course takes place on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, starting Wednesday, July 8th. And as I mentioned earlier, if you can't be there live, that's fine. You won't miss any of the teachings because you will receive audio and video recordings, which you can keep forever, transcripts, all course handouts on your course homepage, and also the Shift Network offers a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, giving you a full 2 weeks until July 22nd in this case, to make sure that you absolutely love it. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect in a private Facebook community group so you can connect with one another. Also, everyone who registers receives the Celtic Virtues bonus collection. First, you'll receive a video dialogue with Sandra Ingerman and Jane entitled The Powers of the Elements. Next, you'll get a PDF article by Jane called Ancestral Patterning, Opportunity or Fate. Then you'll receive a video dialogue with Jane and Anthony Murphy entitled The Living Wisdom of the Ancient Sacred Sites of Ireland. Plus, you'll get a video teaching from Jane called The Loss of Sovereignty, a Celtic Ancestral Story. And when you register by midnight Pacific on Thursday, July 2nd, you'll receive this extra gift, and that is a video dialogue with Jane and Evelyn Rysdyk entitled How the Old Gods and Goddesses Ruled the Elements, a Celtic and Nordic comparison. So before we get back into questions, Jane, let me ask you, what are you most looking forward to in your upcoming course?
Well, I love working with the virtues. They're incredibly rich, and what a great guide for how to bring balance into our lives, how to always find the balance point in our lives. It's like I was saying before with the tree. You go to the tree and take the discord in some relationship that you have, and you say, what virtue do I need to hone here? And it might be compassion, and it might be forgiveness, and it might be generosity, and it might be gratitude. It's something that you just weren't realizing. And once you understand, if I seize on that and I hone that and I kind of dedicate myself to becoming more grateful, to becoming more generous with this person, to becoming more compassionate towards this person, then I can bring this situation into balance, this situation that has frustrated me for so long. But it's not just in relationship. I mean, it's really like in any challenge in our lives, and that's really where we're tested. We see that all the time, things that test our patience, things that test our humility, that test our strength, our endurance, our equanimity, our courage. We see it all the time. That's why these things are coming to us, to hone those very things. Adversity builds character, doesn't it? And and it also helps us to hone these virtues. I've taught workshops on the virtues before, and they're very rich, and we can find evidence of them in the stories that provide wonderful teachings, either in how to embrace this particular virtue, or what happens when you don't embrace that virtue. The more cautionary tales. So I am looking forward to jumping back in to teaching the virtues, which I haven't done for I think about 5 years maybe. And I love this particular work. I also love teaching about the trees. I love trees, and they're a huge part of my spiritual life. And so I love sharing some of the conversations that I've had with trees, and the many things that I've learned from them. As particularly with respect to the virtues.
All right. Well, thank you for that. But somebody's asking, what's the difference between the course that you taught recently with the Shift Network and this upcoming one?
Well, I think it's just a difference in focus, really. There's a lot that's similar. The structure is very similar because I'm still using the myths, and we're still journeying into characters in the myths. Each one of the myths will present to us a character that we can journey to and ask for some kind of wisdom. And then, the tree will provide us with some kind of teaching or some kind of practice or some kind of ritual for how we can apply that wisdom in our life. So the trees are kind of working in tandem a little bit with the characters and the stories. But the structure is very similar. I'll begin with a poem, and I'll end with a blessing, and we'll do a journey every time, and we'll have a myth every time. And so there's a lot of similarity in that sense, but the focus is very different. The focus last time was on the Celtic wisdom wheel, and we were using that particular structure to help us to go through and kind of look at different aspects of our lives and how we might change them, and the things that we stumble on, and why that happens, and where we can find the strength to maybe walk with more purpose in the world, and certainly with more of a sense of place and standing and entitlement, or what we call sovereignty, which was really kind of a large part of the teaching last time. We spent a lot of time talking about sovereignty and building up to that, and what that is and why that's important. It's not going to be necessarily left off in this particular 10-week course, because sovereignty is really kind of in many ways the bottom line. It is in some ways the sum and total of all of those virtues, because when you have honed all of those virtues, and you have brought these aspects of imbalance in your life into accord and into strength, you do have sovereignty over your life. And I think in some ways there's no way of getting around the particular importance that sovereignty plays in Celtic shamanism. But it's just a matter of focus. I don't think beyond that that there's really much difference.
Okay. All right. And while we're speaking of differences and similarities, Becky's asking, Becky says, I'm of Lakota descent, and I feel very strongly connected to the desert. But I also feel very strongly connected with everything that you've said. Is that maybe because of past lives, or because of the similarities in shamanism?
It can be because of past lives. I think that there's a strong affinity that, there's a beautiful story. I don't know if you're aware of it, that during the time of the Great Hunger, which took place between 1840 and 1860 in Ireland, I hope I'm saying this right, I think it was the Cherokee Nation, really responded to that. They really understood the experience of the Irish during the Great Hunger, and they, even though they were very poor, and they had not long before arrived in Oklahoma after they had gone through the horrible Trail of Tears experience. They amassed together like $100 and sent it to Ireland to help the people. And there is a monument in Ireland built in memory of that, because that money in terms of like today, present day, was tens of thousands of dollars. And it was a huge amount of money for these people. But they responded because they recognized their own experience and the Irish experience. I think that, that's true of all indigenous cultures, that have suffered under imperialism, under organized religion, under just, the modernization of the world and colonialism. And so there is that kind of, there's something in the heartbreak and in the grief and in the sorrow and the plaintiveness in the tales that just speaks to us as human beings. We all have indigenous roots. So there is that overlap between among culture to culture to culture. That's really what the study of core shamanism is. But I also think that it's quite possible that it's just that recognition, particularly if you're close to your own indigenous ties, that you really, the indigenous expression of other cultures just really speaks to you. There's no learning curve there. You get it, and there's a lot of similarity. That they saw the world in the same way. They lived close to nature in the same way, tended the land in the same way, loved the land in the same way, and that's unmistakable when you encounter it.
Okay, thank you. On another topic entirely, Sharon says, I've followed the old ways my whole life. My mom had a statue of Bridget and Mary, which I was taught was the same person. But I've lost touch with this side of myself. Could the gods be angry with me?
Oh, I don't know. I always think that the spirits are so happy when the prodigal son or daughter returns. Yeah. It's wonderful to come back. And I think usually we are, welcomed with open arms. I don't know. I mean, they say that, the gods don't like to be ignored, and they kind of get their noses out of joint, with that, because they like to be honored, But I think in terms of like, where we do get caught up in the world and we get lost and we get disconnected, the helping spirits understand that that's the human condition. And in some ways that's necessary. You kind of have to, lose something before you understand its value. And there's something really beautiful when you, all the effort that you make to return to it. It's like, as Joni Mitchell says, don't know what you got till it's gone. So I don't think they'd be hung up about that at all. I think they'd be delighted.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Looking at the clock here, we're almost out of time. And you mentioned earlier that you close every class session with a blessing. So how would you like to close our time together with one?
I'm happy to do that. As I said before, I mean, I think that this is a time when we need to have allies, and I hope that you will remember Arian Rod and include her among your allies, and the moon that she rules among your allies. And so I want to give you this Celtic prayer to the moon that you can say to her when you go out at night and look up at the sky. So it goes like this. I am bending my knee to you. I am lifting my eyes to you. I am bowing my head to you, O new moon of the periods. Glory to you, O shining lantern of the ocean, guiding my rudder with your mysterious love.
All right, thank you. Well, this has been just a lovely conversation. I want to thank our viewers for being with us today and for all of your questions. Once again, Celtic Virtues to Cultivate Lasting Peace Within begins Wednesday, July 8th. And again, you can visit CelticShamanismCourse.com to learn more and to register. So, Jane, in addition to that beautiful blessing, do you have any final words for our viewers?
Well, yes. I mean, what I want to say is, it's true that we keep talking about, the things that we need, the skills that we need for this transformative time. But these are skills that you really will use all of your life, as you move forward. You're always going to be tested and tried. That's the way things are here. Life is hard. So, I think that this course provides a lot of good skills and perspective in how to live well and how to live deeply on the earth. And I hope that you will join us.
All right. Wow. Well, thank you again, Jane. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right. And once again, thank you to everyone who joined us today. On behalf of all of us at the Shift Network, I wish you well and look forward to having you on this course or perhaps another one in the future. Have a great day, everyone.